Hi everyone, it's Lars here, and welcome to the first ever virtual paddock video. Now in my time in sim racing so far, I've driven lots of different cars. Some I ended up driving very often, some not that often, and there are certain cars that really require certain skills if you want to be properly fast with them. And the more you drive these cars, the more you build those skills. So here, in no particular order, are 5 cars that I feel really helped me improve as a sim racer. First one, the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car in both Assetto Corsa and Race Room. This car really helped me develop a better feel for braking. It doesn't have that much downforce, so it's very easy to lock up without ABS. Which it doesn't have at all in Race Room, and in Assetto Corsa I always turn it off. Now, the real car doesn't have ABS in factory spec, but allows for it to be retrofitted, and the regulations are up to each individual Porsche Cup series. But personally I prefer it without ABS. And also, as a rear-engine car, it requires an extremely smooth driving style. And if you're too aggressive, the backhand basically turns into a pendulum and you will spin. So overall, a very challenging car to drive, but also very fun. And if you stick with it, you will be rewarded and you will improve. Next is the NSU TTS in Race Room. It's an older car from the late 60s, and I found to be one of the best cars for learning heel and toe. Honestly, I'm not very good yet at that technique, but I am improving. And this car, with a 4-speed manual and about 120 horsepower, feels just right in terms of pace. It's not overly fast, but not super slow either. By the way, like the Porsche, it's also rear-engined. But since it's a much smaller engine, you don't really feel it that much. It feels nicely balanced actually. And overall, not that difficult to handle, which allows me to really focus on my heel and toe practice if I want to. And generally, very fun car to drive. By the way, fun fact, you might notice that the bonnet is slightly open. And that's because otherwise, this car wouldn't have sufficient engine cooling. If you closed the bonnet, the engine would very easily overheat, even on the road. Then we've got the X30 class karts in Kartcraft. Kartcraft is still a very new game and in early access, and the X30 karts are pretty much the only class available so far. So I guess I could have just listed the game as a whole. But regarding the point of this video, these helped me to finally get my vision and focus right. Because for the longest time I've always caught myself not really focusing enough on what's ahead and like properly visualizing my lines. But with karts being so close to the ground, everything just feels extremely fast. And it absolutely forces me to focus on what's next. Then add to that the addiction factor that, to me, Kartcraft already has. And the result is that a crucial skill for a racing driver is finally becoming more natural to me. And because of this, I'm also a lot more comfortable now with the really quick and high downforce cars, like Formula 1 cars. Still quite far from where I want to be, but it has become a bit easier for me to keep up. Up next, the URD PX1 Shiro for Assetto Corsa. This is part of a pay mod by United Racing Design, and it's basically a recreation of the 2015 Nissan GT-R LM Nismo, which is a very unique car. It's an LMP1 with a front engine and front wheel drive. Of course, with a hybrid system, make it an optional all-wheel drive. And with that layout, it feels unlike any other car. It doesn't feel like other prototypes, since they're usually mid-engine and rear-wheel drive. But it also doesn't feel like other front-wheel drive racing cars, because those usually are slower and not high downforce. So it requires a very unique driving style. As you're braking and turning into a corner, the rear end gets much lighter than you'd expect from an LMP1, so you easily get oversteer on entry, and you catch that slide by getting back on the throttle very early, which then in turn leaves you with a high risk of power understeer. It's a very counterintuitive driving style, and I only got this car very recently, so I'm still struggling with it. I am slowly getting used to it, but I feel like by driving a car like this, it's very helpful in becoming more adaptive, and it keeps me from getting too locked into one style. And last but not least, the Audi R8 LMS Ultra from Raceroom. It might be a bit of a stretch to include this one in this video, because it's not really down to the car, but more how I used it. Because last summer I used this car for 6 weeks in a series on SimRacing System every Sunday evening, and during the week I'd always really prepare for the upcoming race, and it was also the first time I really went into setups. I learned the basics of setup on this car. After any change, I'd do a few laps to see how it felt, then maybe try another change, do another few laps, and through that I really learned to feel the subtle differences you make through setup. Now, obviously it could have been any other car from the same class, but before the first race I did a quick test run with each car, and I liked the R8 best. It felt the most neutral, I guess, so I decided to stick with it. And while it wasn't the car requiring me to learn certain skills, I did learn important skills on this car. So that's it. 5 cars that I think were very important to my progress in sim racing. I definitely still have a lot of room to improve in all of these cars and in general, but I think that without these cars I would not be where I am now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Till next time, use the downforce and see you soon.